Well, let's get driving here. We want to talk about trucking and, just why it is the way it is. And I'm here in Corpus Christi, Texas, driving a load of, I think it's cereals, up to Phoenix, Arizona. And let's just talk about the whole reason why we're doing this on a truck and not on a train or any other vehicle. It all goes back to long ago when people were just trying to move things around. Of course, river systems have always been a favorite of people to move things around on. They're because they're there, and you just put stuff on a boat and you float it down the river, and away you go. But over time, it became problematic because you'd have these places that get built up away from navigable rivers, and if that happens, well, then you could be moving goods on the river. Then you have to drop them off at a siding, and then a landing, break down the cargo, and then start shipping it out in pieces to the rest of the the hinterlands, the stuff inside that area. You needed a better way to move things around, so canals came up next. They would connect river to river and allow for a better penetration of the hinterlands than before. And in fact, canal systems were dominant across both the Low Countries and England, which were contributing factors to early industrialization in both England and Belgium. France had a pretty significant canal system as well that helped its industrialization. And this is one reason why the United States, hang on here, let me check here. Yeah, this is one reason why the United States developed a canal system early on in its history. They also wanted to develop a road system. Where'd that guy come from? Didn't he know I had right of way? Anyway, but yeah, they built out a canal and a road system in the USA very early in its history in order to help generate commerce and connect the nation one to another. And that was the idea there. Now, what are you going to ship bulk cargoes on? The canals and the rivers. The roads were more for postal communication, passenger traffic, light loads, things like that. Because the roads they had were essentially packed dirt. Even in the cities, packed dirt. And yeah, don't worry about my driving here. I'm in Texas. This is all right. Let me go ahead and just get it up to speed, and there we go. But yeah, packed dirt is what they're on. And you cannot put a huge load on top of packed dirt without it leading to problems, breaking up that, dirt. Oh, we got a little thing here. Let's just signal, get over. Whoa, that guy did not see my signal. Well, that one will see it. Anyway, yeah, if you've got a bunch of stuff moving around on packed dirt there, it's going to break it up. It's just not good to have huge loads on there. If you're going to have huge loads, you need it on a road that can bear it. And at the time, it was the canals. Well, then came the railroad, a road made of rails. And those things, well, they could hold up all right. And because they could hold up all right, they got used for carrying huge loads on them. And these could go in between river ports. We would then see, once the railroads developed, a lot of traffic got shifted off of waterways and off of people's backs and horses and carts and things like that, and became part of the rail network that we had going on. And that was all fine and good and stuff, but you still have the issue with rail networks that you also have with canal and river networks. They don't go literally everywhere. You're going to have to eventually take those loads when they get off the train, break them down into smaller loads, put them on horse wagons and people's backs, and get them to where they ought to be going. Eventually warehouses, distribution centers, and retail outlets. You're not going to have a train take it to every single shop in town. So how do you get that stuff moved around efficiently? Well, horse wagons were about it until the development of the horseless carriage, and the first ones were actually running on electrical motors. Daimler's first truck was on an electrical engine, and it had a very, very short range. It was only good for short haul trucking within the city. Also, because, again, considering the loads that it was carrying, the cities were most likely to have packed dirt roads, and stuff in between cities was more likely to have loose dirt roads. I'm going to have to pull over here and get checked out. And loose dirt roads, you just do not want to drive any kind of heavy vehicle over. It's just not going to be good for the road, not going to be good for the car. It's going to get stuck, mired down. But in the cities, like I was saying, that's where you got the packed roads, and you could be okay with those. All right, so Daimler had his trucks, and some of them were just little more than there for the novelty of it all to advertise that you'd have major loads being drawn by the horse carriages. But with the development of the internal combustion engine, that's where the idea of a truck really came into its own, where you could have something very large that could have a longer range because of the gasoline-powered engine and help cover distances the way you really couldn't cover them before. Now, instead of having to have every single settlement hooked up on a rail line, if you had a good quality road in between settlements, you could put a truck on that road and get it going. And be able to connect that up and have it receive goods and services. Well, mostly goods. Services. I keep saying goods and services. That's the economist in me. Just talking about that in general. When I say goods and services, I mean goods. Just remember that. Let's signal to get on and not try to wreck anybody and merge carefully. There we go. My left-hand mirror is right underneath my head. That's why you don't see it there, but I can see what's going on there. You'll be safe with me. Anyway, where were we? Oh, yeah, the quality of roads in between cities had to improve in order to take advantage of these new trucks coming around that would do their trucking thing. Let me get over. Speaking of the trucking thing, let me get over here, get around this slow poker. Hopefully that'll work. Oh, no, it's a slow guy in front. And eventually we'll get going good. You gotta love adjustable speed cruise control. One of the many things that make modern day trucking so much more pleasurable than olden time trucking. So, starting around 1914, 1917, around that time is where USA was looking at improving the roads in between cities for the purpose of trucking. As it was, trucks themselves couldn't get going too fast because they had solid rubber tires. That's a terrible ride. And with the condition the roads were in, they were only topping out at 15 miles an hour to be safe and respectful for the cargo. But when you started metaling roads more, that's where you could get up to a higher speed. And then with the invention of the pneumatic tire that came about, basically you would inflate the tire, it was much better at carrying roads than the solid tire. Then you had something you could move those trucks around on. Now, what do I mean by a metalled road? Well, what I'm driving on here is a really good metalled road. Texas is great for metalled roads. Remember, we talked about the differences between dirt and packed dirt, and packed dirt was better for holding more of a load on it. Well, if you put gravel on top of that dirt, it's going to be even better than the packed dirt because it can absorb moisture and help carry that load around there, help distribute it better. But if you have something made like with this, what this asphalt here is, or if you put tar down, even that'll give you a surface that your tires can get a good grip on, and because it is firmer than the dirt, it's going to hold that load better, and you could put a higher amount of load on there. Now, you'll still see paved streets that have warnings on them that say trucks can't come on here because they're too heavy for this road. It's not rated for that, and that's some other road physics and science that you need to keep in mind. But for the most part, the trucks are going to be on roads that they can handle. And one other thing that's very important is a good shoulder on your road. So that way, if you want to go around an accident like we do here in Texas, why, you can just creep along on the shoulder, have a little bit of a damage to your car when you hit the little guardrail like I did, but then go along just fine as you move along. I got insurance. I can handle that, no problem. Anyway, and I didn't damage my load, and that's what's really important here. Woo! That truck looks like it's in a bad way, but you can see the trailer on it, and those things came about around 1914 is when we had the invention of the fifth wheel. It's the circular thing on the back end of a truck, the cab truck that I'm driving, that allows the connection of a container on wheels. So that way the truck is no longer something that you have to park and unload and then load up again. That takes a lot of time, the loading and unloading, and drivers don't want to have to stand around for it, and they certainly don't want to be doing it. Well, if you have a trailer like I do on mine, then you just put the trailer on there with, hook it into the fifth wheel, and then once it's connected, you drive away with it. I deliver it to its destination, unhitch it, and then I can pick up another trailer almost right away and get going again. Let somebody else deal with the loading and unloading of it, and once it's finally unloaded, it's ready to get loaded again, and then you call another truck to bring it in. Much more efficient that way. You certainly can't do that with trains right now. Oh, well, you could if you take the actual containers and load them and unload them on the train with a crane, but then what are they going to go to for that? They're going to get hooked right back onto a truck again because it's all designed to be intermodal like that. Intermodal means you have different modes of travel, like barge, train, truck, pipeline. All of those are different modes of transport, and in order to take it from one place to another in bulk, you may have it on a barge or a train, and then you go to an intermodal transfer node and put it all on a truck, or you have small loads coming in on trucks going into the intermodal transfer and put it on a train. But I think I have digressed. We are talking about the metalled roads, and these came about along the same time that we had the trailer thing coming around, right around the early 1910s. And in 1917 was really a banner year for trucking in the USA, because that was when the U.S. entered World War I, and the rail system in the USA got all snarled up. Trucks were needed more than ever before to get things to where they needed to go without having to use the rail system. So more roads got built out, more metalled roads got built out, trucks became used more often, and we saw trucking go to about 10% of all of U.S. Freight commerce during those war years. Now, after the war years, trucking went down again, but then it started to come back during the Great Depression, and then World War II, and afterward, trucking increased in amounts every year. Woohoo! 80 miles an hour. Gotta love Texas. And by the way, you see how we're cutting through this little hill here? That has something to do also with the influence of trucking in the development of commerce in the USA. Because one thing trucks could do very effectively, like would be to move loads from one area to another very quickly and easily, and sometimes faster than if you put them on a train. Right now, I'm hauling a load in a simulation, and somewhere someone decided that it would be cheaper and faster, or both, to put this load on my truck and have it drive all the way from Corpus Christi, Texas to Phoenix, Arizona, and not use a train to handle that. Just put it on the truck and have it all stay one mode all the way. Long-haul trucking. Long-haul trucking really got going once the U.S. decided to make a system of national highways, and that was during the Great Depression. Franklin Roosevelt signed that. The idea being the same as what the founding fathers of the U.S. had back when we started things. Get the roads to bind the nation together and to improve commerce. But this time, the roads were not being seen as a method of moving messages and people. They were seen as a bulk transit method on the same level as railroads and barge traffic. There had been some thought that with the advent of the airplane that would supersede trucking. Why would you want to put things in a truck when you could fly them in a plane? Well, the cost of flying everything in a plane turned out to be quite a bit more prohibitive than flying things on trucks. You could still get them there if they absolutely had to be there right away. You'd put them on a plane, but if you didn't need it right away, put it on a truck and let it go with that. But in the 30s is when the U.S. built out the highway system. And this was the U.S. highway system, not the interstate system. U.S. highways would be 2-lane or 4-lane, depending on the amount of traffic they expected. But they would be good metalled roads, and they would be maintained by the U.S. government alongside with any, state or whatever authority was in there. But yeah, they're U.S. roads. They're U.S. roads. And they really did a good job of connecting up the nation. And with those semi-trucks on their pneumatic tires, well, you could move more and more commerce, more freight on the U.S. highway system than ever before. But then during World War II, the limitations of that highway system became evident. We needed additional highways, the interstates, like what I'm on now, separated 4 lanes, 2 lanes each direction, in between the cities that would crisscross the country. Really good quality roads, and unlike those U.S. highways, they would have much more stringent requirements as far as the incline that they could have and the kind of turns that they could have. That's why we see this cut going through here. Instead of going up and down like you would on a U.S. highway, an interstate is going to cut right through it to maintain an even grade, an even incline or decline on a hill. No more than 4%, wherever possible. There are places on the interstate system where that's just not possible. But everywhere they could do it, they kept it 4% or less. And that meant trucks could run easily there with big loads without having to have extra power in the hauling cab. The other part being that if we have easy turns and all, well, it just makes it real easy to drive. I could keep looking at the camera over here and, I'm taking my eyes off the road momentarily and not really have to worry about what's going on up ahead of me. It's a smooth road with a gentle curve on it. That's very nice. Again, there's places where they have to make exceptions, but they reduce the speed limit and you're able to go there. Right now I'm doing 80 and doing fine. This is great fun, driving across Texas. Other states will have mandated limits on their speeds. California is famous for only doing 55 on their trucking routes. But, that's the way it goes. And yes, I'm being kind of rude driving in the passing lane here, but this is a computer simulation and nobody's going to be hollering at me if I stay in this lane. So I'm good there. There's that police car trying to get past me, state trooper. Ooh, is he going to make it? I don't know. Let's drop back. Let's let him through. Let's let him on through. I know he wants to get around. Come on, cop. Here, I'll drop back even more. Let's see if he's going to pass there. Oh, yeah, the interstate system. So as the 50s are going around and we're thinking about how we're going to do this interstate system, he is just not going to pass them. We drew up the plans for them and everything and how these be beautiful ribbons of asphalt going from coast to coast. Then the question came up, how are we going to pay for all this? And this is where the economics kicks in, kiddos. How are you going to pay for all that? Well, you could raise everybody's taxes, but that doesn't seem fair. What if you don't drive on the road at all? Then they thought, well, the people who are going to get the most benefit are the truckers, so make them pay for it. And the American truck industry was up in arms. They said, no way. We do not want a bill to pass that would make us pay for these roads like we're the only ones using them, because we're not the only ones using them. We should pay a proportional share, but not bear the full load. And so it was the trucking industry that defeated that interstate bill. Now, the railroad industry didn't like it either. Trucks and railroads have, all through American history, have been kind of, well, not all through, but ever since trucking started, they've been seen as rivals because railroads will want to say, look, we could move a lot more stuff per train. And the trucks say, well, we offer more flexibility on each load. You know, 6 of one, half dozen the other, if you ask me. But if you look at how business owners interpret it, there definitely is a preference for trucking. And I'll get to that in a little bit here. But back to how they're going to fund the thing. Well, the trucking industry defeated that bill in the first run of it. And then they came back. Ooh, I'm going 90. Let's not do that. let's do 80 here. When they came back the second time, they had a little discussion with the tire industry and the gasoline industry. And they said, how about if we have an excise, a little extra money on every gallon of gas sold and every tire sold, or pound of rubber is really what it was. So if a bigger tire would pay a larger tax on it, and an excise tax on new trucks. And if you combine them, they projected that that would pay for the federal highway system. With those different industry groups in concert with each other, they were able to successfully lobby or persuade Congress to vote that bill in. And this is an interesting part of economics, that nobody ever makes a choice to do one thing or another because they say, oh, this is just going to be good for everybody. There's a lot of stuff that's really technical that nobody knows is going to be good for everybody, or good for some people and not others. It takes experts to explain it to the elected officials, so that way they're able to make that decision. Or sometimes they have to take their case to the public and tell the people, write your congressman about this. This is why we talk about political economics, because the two have to go together. The trucking industry was saying that this is going to be better for us overall. And really, the rubber and the gasoline industry would benefit from all this. People are going to buy more tires and buy more cars and buy more gas with more better interstates in between the cities. The passenger traffic is going to benefit from that as well. It's mostly the trucking industry that benefits, but others do. So get them to pay for it. Woo, that's crazy there. It's hard to steer when you're using a controller and trying to give a dissertation on economics at the same time, but yet I manage. I have not had any accidents, just that one little ding on the thing. Okay, well, knock on wood. I won't have any more accidents. Yuck, yuck, yuck. Anyway, but yeah, so you have these lobbying groups have to explain to elected officials and the public, this is what we think should be going on. And then you have other lobbying groups that may have a different view. Like, for example, the railroads. They may not want a lot of interstates because that would mean more traffic on them and less on the rails. And that's less money that they could earn hauling those loads. So I mentioned earlier that there is a reason why the USA or the trucking seems to be more popular among U.S. businesses than trains. I looked up some figures. I went back to 1980. And in 1980, USA had about 4 million tons of traffic moved through different modes. And you look at the figures, it's roughly an even split. 25% for trains, waterways, pipelines, and trucks. Even all the way around. I found that interesting. Then I went forward to 2022. Now keep in mind, everything was 25% in 1980. That's in my lifetime. I was only a young lad of 12 back then. You're all doing the math and figured out I'm 56. Well, good for you. That's at the time of this recording. I'm going to be older later on, just so you know. I'll keep breathing. Anyhow, so 25% across the board in 1980. Now that is up from 0% trucking back in 1900 or so, and about 10% during World War I. So it's definitely kept going up through the years. Well, in 2022, just 42 years later, trucking was handling over 40% of the total tonnage moved, the total freight tonnage moved in the USA. 40% by truck. We have added a lot more interstates. We have widened interstates where needed. We have made much more roads on the U.S. since 1980. I can testify to that. And even the U.S. highway system has been widened and made to look more like the interstate system in many parts, especially on high traffic areas. As populations develop in rural areas, they need more trucks to bring goods to them. So they just don't have a rail connection, and the road is, well, it's cheaper to build, it's easier to build, and it's, well, I don't know about that for sure, but I do know you can have regular people use it. I don't have a personal train. I do have a personal car. I'll benefit from an interstate more than I will a new rail line. You can see some of the lobbying going on there just for me. But certainly, to go from 25 to 40%, over 40%, in just 42 years, that's a huge move. And by comparison, pipeline, waterway, and railroads have diminished. They're no longer at 25%. I think railroads are now around 20%, and then the rest are correspondingly lower to make up for the increase in the trucks. And that's because people who do all the commerce, the ones who are moving the freight around, are looking at trucks and thinking it makes sense to move it more. It makes sense to move it by truck more often than not. It's just more effective that way. Now, we can also talk about the greenhouse gases and things like that, and we should, because one reason trucking was so much cheaper is because, well, all the pollution generated from it didn't have to be paid for by anyone else. There was no cost on it. There was no dollar amount that says, okay, we're doing this many dollars worth of pollution on our haul, and we're doing this much dollars worth of pollution overall. Nobody was measuring that sort of thing, especially when the industry was just getting started. But over time, we've realized, okay, running these engines, burning these, using tires and all this, they do have they have environmental impacts. And we need to be aware of them. We need to do something about them, because the payment for that is falling on people who aren't using the trucks. Now, they benefit from truck usage in the movement of goods from one place to another. That you think about it, a grocery store in the United States is 72 hours away from being completely empty. Within 24 hours, all the good stuff's gone. Within 72 hours, everything's gone, because we're that desperate. We'll go ahead and eat the stuff that, like, oh, I didn't really want to buy it, but I guess I will. If we didn't have trucks constantly replenishing those grocery stores, we'd have totally empty shelves. And in fact, during the supply chain issues we had in the coronavirus epidemic, we did see empty shelves in the USA. We did have a breakdown of the supply chain. There was a very serious business there. When the trucks couldn't roll, or they couldn't get loaded and rolled, we faced those kinds of shortages. We are a very truck dependent society. You could say that maybe we've become too dependent. We've built a trap for ourselves, and we have to live in it every day. That's a fair criticism. James Burke mentioned that in his famous series that started in the 1970s called Connections. The very first series of Connections, I highly recommend it. It's I believe 10 episodes, very informative. But he talks about the technology trap that we build for ourselves. All right, so we're very dependent on the trucks. How do we make it to where we could use them but have them not damage the environment? Well, step one, we talk about green fuels, make them use biodiesel, but we're still, it's still diesel. You still have to process stuff. If you go over to plant monoculture to create the diesel fuels, you're going to have other environmental issues there. So what about electric trucks? Well, if we recall from the 1880s, they didn't have a very big range on them. They weren't, fun to use outside of the cities because they just constantly needed topping up. And it's still that way right now. We don't have a lot of long-haul trucking possible with electrical engines. But we have seen short haul trucking, all the little delivery trucks for the various services. Once everything lands at the big distribution center, and they put them on the smaller vans and the non-semi hauling trucks, those are predominantly going over to greener fuels or 100% electric. The idea being that if your electricity is now generated from green sources and you power your cars with that green source, you're now no longer having fossil fuels as part of the equation. Because, if you power your electricity with a coal plant, you're just moving the pollution impact from one location to another. You're still externalizing the cost from the person who should be bearing the brunt of it. Well, with short haul electric trucks, we're definitely seeing some better environmental prospects for the big cities. So what about the ones about in between the cities, the kind of things that I'm running here? Because right now, an internal combustion engine is going to be more cost effective at moving the goods we need between cities. But we're working on that. If we can get to where an electrical engine has battery power on a vehicle this size that can make that big distance there and charge quickly, that's another thing too. Filling up a tank of gas, it doesn't take too long. It's going to be a while, but you're not going to be there for hours filling up your gas. You'll get it done and be able to have a good quick turnaround that way. But if electrical charging takes too long, then it's not viable. It's slowing down the process. You'll have to figure out a way to either charge it faster or just tell people wait more. And they may not be willing to do that. They may be willing to say, let's pay a little extra for running that truck and doing what we need to do with it. But I think there's still a future for it because it still is something. Now, whether you have electric cars or gas cars, you still have to deal with the leftover tires. When tires get worn out, they don't just poof and disappear. They've got to go somewhere. And I've seen tire disposal sites that are just nothing but tires, and every now and then they catch fire. And I know it's fun to hear a Texan say tire fire. Look, y'all, it's a tire fire. What? Yeah, fire in the tire. But those are a tire fire is a really serious economic thing, not environmental thing, I should say. The smoke is horrible from those things. It's nasty. And you can't just put a tire in a shredder. Those things are tough. They're built to withstand the road. They're built to withstand tens of thousands of pounds on top of them on a road like this for thousands of miles. They don't just fall apart. Being able to take those tires and figure out how we can convert them into usable, recyclable materials is a major challenge for environmentalists. And I do hope we find a way to make it work, because it would be kind of a sad thing if we got our air all cleaned up from turning everything into green energy and electrical engines running on green fuel, and then have it all get polluted with a tire fire, or to be buried under a pile of tires because we just can't figure out what to do with all that used rubber. Yeah, it's a thing. But there are some promising ideas. One of them is to use bacteria or other small living organisms that are specially made to go in and digest the big complex polymers that we have that make up a tire. If you think about it, the way organic chemistry works, essentially each tire is one molecule, and it's really well bound to itself. It's very difficult to break down, but if you get the right kind of bioengineering going on, you might just be able to make an organism that could take that tire and break it down, just bust into it and do what it needs doing. I'm very hopeful for that. I would love to be able to see that. And that's really the hope for things, that yes, we live in a technology trap, but maybe the way forward is more technology. maybe knowing more things and inventing more things and innovating more things will allow us to solve the problems made by the innovations we had and the inventions we had from yesteryear that themselves solved some other problems. I mean, right now, this truck, I know I'm simulating it, but this truck is solving a problem that a train or an airplane or a canal or a pipeline couldn't solve. And if we want to keep it solving that problem, we've got to find a way to make it more efficient, less polluting, more environmentally friendly, but still keep the costs low to where we don't then have a huge shock when we go to the store and find out that suddenly we can't afford our daily staples. I mean, you wouldn't like it if everything went up in cost because suddenly it's much more harder to transport. Think about people who live on islands and how they have to pay so much more for their goods. Why? Because getting goods to the islands costs so much more. You have a lot more intermodal transfers. You've got less efficient modes of transportation like boats and things. It's not easy getting it out to that island. Or remote areas of Alaska where things have to get there via airplane. Even more expense involved there. Those remote areas that can't be served by trucks have higher costs overall. Those that are served by trucks, well, they have lower costs, and that means more purchasing power for the consumer. When you consider how much money you have and how much do you get for it, that's your purchasing power. Normally, what we'll do is we'll take a basket of goods and services, and we could either say it's a fixed price one, like how much will $100 get me, or how much will so much of this, so much of that, like how much, like if I bought a gallon of milk, 2 pounds of steak, 10 pounds of flour, and some vegetables, how much does that cost me? And if it would have cost me $100 in 1960 to buy this basket of goods and services and cost me $1,000 today, we could say, well, my purchasing power has declined over the years. But then, if my wages have increased by the same proportion, then I'm none the worse for it. If I would have made $10,000 in 1960, but I make $100,000 now, or $1 million now, well then, if prices increased by the same percentage as my pay did, I break even. The thing is, though, prices have increased by more than most people's pays have increased. So, yes, we have seen a decline in purchasing power parity. It's called the disappearing middle class, and it's a very serious thing, and that might be worth another discussion there, but I'm going to lay off it right now. We just want to talk about the idea of purchasing power parity. I mean, I still got, 6 more hours before I get to Phoenix? Well, 6 more game hours. I think it's at a 120 scale, so I can knock them out in about 3 more minutes, or 3 minutes per hour, I think, or something like that. As long as I'm not going through a city. It's all at scale. But anyway, purchasing power. Now, another thing, and this is a fun one, the Economist magazine has what's called the Big Mac Index. And it's just basically look at the cost of a Big Mac in various places in the world, and then look at how much their currency trades relative to the dollar. And you put the two together in a little equation, and you figure out, okay, this is how much purchasing power they have. And it's a very quick and easy calculation. It's quite effective. Oh, the inspection station's closed. All right, I'll just enjoy driving a little faster then and not having to get checked out. That's nice. But yeah, the Big Mac Index. If you think of how much your hamburger would cost in one part of the world, and then with the exchange rate and all, and then local costs, it'll cost this much more or less, you can say, well, then where it costs more, I have more purchasing power than the folks who live there. Where it costs less, they have more purchasing power, parity, than I do. And that will tell you in general where your dollars or your currency is going to go further based on that idea. All right. So back in the area here. Consumers benefit from lower prices. Always. Always benefit from lower prices. If we are only looking at the prices. But if that consumer is also a worker in a local industry that can only produce goods at a certain price, it's less efficient than something that's being hauled in from somewhere else, then that consumer is damaged by the lower prices, but not as a consumer. The worker's damaged. You wear different hats all through the day, you see. Sometimes you're a worker, sometimes you're a consumer, sometimes you're a parent, sometimes you're a child. It's all different there. But in terms of economics, consumers are going to benefit from lower prices. So that's why a shirt made in China that costs less than a shirt made in the USA, not a lot of people are asking questions, why is that shirt cheaper? They're just looking at it and saying, I can buy more of these shirts, or I could buy the same number of shirts I was going to buy before, but have more money left over to buy other things. In any case, my purchasing power goes further. But if you pay a little bit more for that American shirt, well, you'll buy fewer things in total, but there can be other aspects of that equation that might concern you as you make that purchase. For example, what were the labor practices used where that shirt was made cheaply? What were the environmental practices where that shirt was made cheaply? This may not be happening in your backyard, but it's happening somewhere. And that's why it's cheaper, because they cut corners. They paid less, they pollute more, and other things going on like that. Whereas the more expensive shirt made in your home country, and I use the USA as an example because I live here, but it could be the same in other places, the higher cost you have for something made domestically could be a result of higher total pay, better environmental, better working conditions, safer working conditions. You pay for those. And so paying that higher cost locally could mean that you are protecting a local job and a better job at that in terms of overall quality. It's safer and safer, less polluting, and things like that. And it could be your own job for all you know. And this is getting into the idea of how do you compete with other countries who are able to make these cheaper goods that do benefit consumers, but they're still cheaper and they're still cutting corners that you're not cutting. How do you protect your own domestic industries? And this brings up the big P word, protectionism. And free marketers don't like that word. And honestly, I'm not a free marketer, but I don't like it either, because it could lead to lazyism. There are some cases where I think protectionism is justified. That if you have a situation where you want to make sure your local guys don't go out of work, well then, and we got to pull in there. Okay. Anyway, if you want to make sure that you have a local industry going because you want your workers to have jobs, you don't want to have a labor riot or things like that. You don't have, if your people have a job, then they don't demand things like free bread because they're out of work or destitute. And you can't just say simply, well, there's no more jobs of that to be had here. Go emigrate to China where those jobs are. If you want to protect them, you need a protective tariff that makes those goods you're importing cost more, so that way locally made goods have an even playing field. But then what if that protective tariff is something where let's make that tariff even higher, and with that higher tariff, we can now justify an even higher cost domestically and make bigger profits off of it. Now it's no longer protecting the workers, it's protecting people who don't need protection. The people who invested in the industry who don't lift a finger, they just have the money do the work. Do they need protection? I don't think they do. But if they are powerful in politics, they can argue for it, they can lobby for it, like we talked about earlier with the lobbying in the Congress to get the highway bill passed the way that the industries would like it. Well, more lobbying makes it where they get more profits, and those profits pay for more lobbying efforts. You make enough donations to congressmen, eventually they're going to listen to you. and you wind up with a protective tariff that is damaging to consumers. It's damaging to the industry. It makes it less efficient overall. So what's a better way of protecting? Well, not always can you get a protective tariff, and sometimes you have to find ways to make your own industry more competitive, more efficient, either finding ways to automate, and now that does mean potentially fewer jobs or different jobs that require different skills, ways to maybe use the same number of people you have but make them produce more units per hour. That would be another form of efficiency. And if you have that higher efficiency, then you reduce the total cost to make that good, and then it gets on a level where it's competitive with your feared foreign competitor, or even your feared competitor down the road. Think about this. If you have two businesses side by side and one is making something more cheaply than the other, that you can't say, let's put a protective tariff on the guy next door, although there have been attempts to do that. If they're following the same labor practices and environmental practices that you are, you've got to find a way to be as efficient as them, or it's your game over. That, or else you find a way to differentiate and say that there's actually, the reason they're cheaper is because it's cheaper quality. Ours is higher quality. We have some differentiating factors that make it to where what we have is not a commodity, but you're paying for your quality. We're not selling to the down end market. We're selling to the high end discerning consumer who wants something a little bit better than the average Joe or whatever. I mean, yeah, it's like that. I'm going to shift lanes here, and there we go. We're going to get back up to speed. But yeah, being more efficient means you don't have to ask for a protective tariff in order to keep your competition going. And it's more palatable to the free marketeers because then you're just becoming more efficient. But if more efficiency does mean fewer jobs, then we have to be able to figure out, well, how do we find new jobs for the people who are laid off? Should the company that's laying them off pay the education costs to retrain them? That's a question. Some would argue yes, some would argue no. And that argument is a valid argument. It's something that political systems exist in order to have people vote on and solve and resolve and all that. You've got to have people talk it out and come to an agreement on what you're going to do to get a solution there. And the solution that's best, I think, is the one that appeals to the most people, for whatever reason. Even if someone's been completely lied to, but they're happy about it, then they feel good about it. That's their choice. That's what they want. And you may have to just throw your hands up in frustration and say, okay, let them live with it. And if they change their mind later on, I hope that they haven't gone too far and they're able to figure out the way back. Sometimes you just got to let people make mistakes. That's part of freedom. Freedom of choice, freedom of everything. Authoritarianism is saying, I don't want you to make a mistake. So, if the government says we don't want people to make mistakes, so the government will be in charge of making mistakes. That's a dim view of government, but there are times where that happens. Now, there's also times where having government involvement does prevent a miscarriage of the market, of either a market failure or just perverse incentives, things like that. But they can also introduce them. We're all humans. If we think the government's best for handling a choice, then we need to make sure we've given the government the tools and data that it needs to handle that choice. And if we think private individuals are best at figuring out a choice, then by golly, we've got to get them educated and trained and prepared to where they're able to make the best choice. Because if we do all this in ignorance, well, we're just shooting blind here. Oh, man. It's been a fun ride here. We've got about another 2 hours to go on the game. That's about 6 more minutes to drive, but I don't want to reach over and have to hit pause in the middle of, I don't want to pause my truck right in the middle of it here. We've come this far. Might as well make it all to the end. Let's have a recap. That's a good thing. We'll have a recap. Oh my gosh, I'm going around that corner pretty darn fast. Hey, well, That's how it goes here. Speed limit 65. Let's have a recap. Trucking in America used to be non-existent because we just couldn't handle it. You could only put so much weight on a horse cart, and a packed dirt road was good enough for that usually. And we moved the big goods on the rails and on the canals and rivers. But you'd always have a problem where you'd have to break it down, unpack it, and that just, the loads were just way too small to begin with. And so with the invention of the internal combustion engine, trucking became viable. And with the invention of the fifth wheel a few years later, semi-trucking became viable, where the entire truck was not one unit. It was the hauling cab, which is what I'm driving here, and then the trailer that's carrying the load, which is what I'm hauling. And with those, it introduced all kinds of economies of scale that appealed to businessmen who were trying to move their goods and stuff around the country. And because it appealed to them, they started using it more and more. And that meant we needed better roads in the USA. More better roads? Yeah, more roads and better roads. Metalled roads, not just packed dirt or gravel roads, but ones with tar and then later asphalt surfaces that would be able to help us out there. And with those better roads, we also got better tires, the pneumatic tires. That also gave trucks better range and capability of going around. So, with those in place, trucking industry took off in the USA with the U.S. highway system in the 30s and then the interstate system in the 50s and beyond. It really took off to where it's now over 40%. Over 40% of all cargo in the U.S. is handled on the trucks. And that's up from when it used to be like 25% or even 10% many, many years ago. We certainly have come a long way with the trucks. And I've come a long way with the trucks, and it looks like this here's my exit coming up. So I better get on over, and then we'll be there. And oh wow, I have an alarm on my phone going off. That's I play Arthur Rubinstein's Liebestraum on my for an alarm I have for a thing that normally I do around this time every day, but or every Sunday, but I don't do it today, and that's why I was doing the truck thing here. But yeah, if you ever get Arthur Rubinstein doing Liebestraum, great recording there. I highly recommend it. If you think you don't like classical music, play that one, and then tell me you don't like classical music, because I just didn't understand it really, or didn't know where to go to get into it. And this one really helped me out. I'm going to turn off my alarm there. Never text and drive at the same time. I was at a full stop. You follow the same requirements there as well. But yeah, Arthur Rubinstein, great guy there. Yeah, boy, if you're still with me, if you're still with me, I hope you have liked and subscribed and made that comment to help out the old algorithm there, because I sure would appreciate that. I do like talking about all kinds of fun things like that. Whoops, I went off the wrong way, didn't I? Oh no, now it gets to be kind of funny here. Oh no. You can see on the little map there, I got a little ahead of myself on the way I was talking and driving, and I wasn't paying attention, was I? I try not to do this in real life, but it looks like that's the way I gotta go. Whoops-a-daisy. I gotta get back on the road there. Oh man, well, wait, which way I go the outer loop? Yeah, I go the outer loop. Okay. Well, maybe if I'm going to get this road, where it needs to go, I'll need to get off the horn here and pause the game and get back, turn off this recording here and get back to driving. But yeah, just be sure to like and subscribe and make a comment. And here I am, I'm rambling on again. Oh my gosh, I'm not going to get onto there. Let's go ahead and hit Alt-Tab and stop the recording so I don't ramble on for the rest of the hour. You have yourselves a good day. I hope you've enjoyed this. Bye for now.